have close to 90 slides. So I'm not going to be able, 95. So I'm not going to be able to get through all of it. But yeah, it's one of those things. I'd rather be over-prepared than anything else. So when I first attempted putting a title onto this, it was during the major shakeup that we had here at Valuer, seeing a ton of our organic traffic go away. And that kind of prompted me to say, if this is happening to a company, for the most part, that isn't doing any black hat shady shit, then everybody is screwed, because we've taken, for the most part, some pretty logical approaches to content and general digital marketing. So I'll go into who I am, talk about me. I'll talk about Talent Garden, because the fuck jobs over at Talent Garden paid $5,000 in order to get this presentation spot, and I got paid $0. So I was like, well, that's kind of neat. And they're like, well, yeah, but it's good press. And I'm like, for who? So there's that. I'll talk about Valuer, and I'm going to skip over the table of contents because I deem that to be unnecessary. Give a fun fact to make myself look human, and then I go into the whole thing. So like the goal of this presentation, because there's so many different types of people, is to provide value. And I want to give every person in any type of job a chance to understand or learn something either about digital marketing, growth hacking, or kind of the overall temperature of what's happening in the future. I tend to do better when I understand that there's some marketers in the audience. So I always like to ask how many people are in digital marketing, how many people are not even remotely associated with that, how many people work in large organizations, come talk to me afterwards. Then I go into a bit of growth hacking and why it's important, theoretical versus real experience, define it, and then I talk about, these are just all kind of the standard things that I put at the beginning. That's why I'm not like really going into deep detail. All right, and this is where it starts to get a little more interesting. So the recent shakeup, the idea is that Google is constantly reevaluating the way that it serves up information. People talk about Google as a search engine. It is an answer engine. The idea is you get onto your phone or laptop or whatever it is to ask a question and hopefully get answers. And the idea is that a lot of changes have happened super quickly just within the last 6 months. And I want people to be aware of that and understand how that's actually going to shape the future in general, not only for e-commerce, but it's every software as a service solution. I mean, every business that has an online presence, which is basically everybody. So this is kind of easier to do because I like the GIFs. So let me do the slideshow from current slide. So EAT. EAT stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. I don't love the vernacular they use to describe this, but the whole concept is this was an early announcement back in February of last year that it got at the fact that there was a need to be able to prevent like fake news, like all these fake news sites, all these people trying to sell shit that wasn't real. And that's all the way from, medical types of things. So this type of wheat cures cancer, or these herbal essences you rub on your skin and you look better. It's all this bullshit stuff. You also have a lot of finance happening. So a lot of ICOs, initial coin offerings. So fintech got fucking slammed by this. But the idea is that Google is starting to add human quality raters to their entire network to say you need to go out there and look at these websites and determine whether or not these sites and individual pages within them actually give something in the way of authority or if they're bullshit. That's how manual penalties happen, and there's plenty of different examples of that. But this was in an effort to curtail all this fake news, right? So then the June core update happened. And the core update, it's one of those things that like, it's a major shift, just like Panda or Hummingbird or Penguin were like these giant shifts within the way that Google worked. And it was out of the blue. Normally they announce these things in February and September. This was in June. And the idea was, it was the YMYL, your money, your life. I kid you not, that's what it fucking stands for. And the idea was that they were, again, trying to curtail a lot of these fake players. So big sites like ccn.com, the Daily Mail, BuzzFeed, Mercola, basically losing upwards of 90 to 95% of their traffic. The dude from Mercola put out like this 10-page manifesto about we all need to stop using Google and let's like rise up. And it's like, yeah, okay, dude, like that's definitely not going to happen because it's so ingrained in us, right? And the reason that Valuer saw a bit of a drop was because we fit into tech. And the idea is that they're trying to get rid of players making false claims and basically bullshitting their way through, what is essentially making a business online. When people started giving a lot of feedback saying, hey, you screwed us, Google, tell us how we can get better or get back into the game, they say there's nothing to fix. And like, that's really ballsy, where it's like, it's like we broke up not because of you, like it is because of you, but like there's nothing you can do about it. Like you're gross. And it's just one of those like really messed up things that you can't really work around. So one of the other things that happened at the exact same time, which makes this core update so difficult to deal with, is it happened exactly around the same time as their diversity update. Diversity update basically was telling people that if you rank for the same keyword on multiple levels, you're basically shit out of luck. So if Valuer ranks for corporate innovation at slot number 1 and number 5, Google basically just tossed them both in the air and goes, okay, now they only rank for slot number 5. And that means you're essentially losing, could be a quarter of your traffic like we did, could be half, who knows? When you're in a really like narrow niche like us, there's only so many key phrases that you can go after. So we got fucked on that one, like big time. And the idea is that this also had an inadvertent effect which fucked up a lot of software companies. So if Adobe Premiere is the only company that puts out Adobe Premiere, and all of a sudden they're ranked number 1, but none of their subpages are ranked underneath that, you have a bunch of these fraudulent scam artists that are basically like, hey, cracked version of Adobe Premiere ranked number 3. Like that's crazy. And that's happening right now. So a lot of bad things came from that in terms of illegal winners. I understand why Google claims like, have you ever done a search and gotten many listings all from the same site? Not anymore. Inadvertent effects. So here's what it looked like for Valuer. And we were chugging along, everything's going great, we're high-fiving, and then June hits, core update and diversity update, wham. We go down there, and they adjusted and did basically a second kind of Trummer update that basically curtailed some of this stuff. And right around that time, we put out that movie blog post. Do you guys remember, like the... movies for entrepreneurs. Yeah, so that brought us back up a little bit. But that was a crazy time. Like I had, for the first few days, no idea why we were losing significant amounts of traffic. Now you think that's bad when we're talking about 10 to 15,000 unique visitors in the span of a month. Talk about going from 3 million down to less than 2 million. You're talking about millions in traffic, and that's fucking money, right? Those are conversions. And you basically have put people out of work. And that's a real thing, and that's what you saw with Mercola, CCN, Daily Mail. But I mean, these weren't necessarily the worst of the worst players. They're just the ones that made headlines for getting screwed.
But is that recovering very fast? Kind of fast.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's the idea is like the July update kind of came back and said, hold on, maybe there's something that we can do about this. But the July update essentially brought some people up and some people further down. And so you did see that on the last slide, which is a fair point. I think I'm bouncing around too much. Hold on. There we go. You did see them come back up only to immediately fall again and continue to fall, which has to be super frustrating if you're running this site. That is like a medical advice site. And the idea is like there is no medical advisory system that says this site is legit versus this site offers BS. And that's why it's so difficult to mitigate or even enforce. And so Google just says, anybody that isn't these known organizations, screw them. They're all screwed, which messes with people's livelihoods. So that was kind of the July volatility and the tremors. And this is kind of what got at the concept of why I wanted to call this "The Future is Paid," because it's a really fucked up situation when you start looking at how the ads, even on mobile, even on desktop, but especially on mobile, are playing out. So I made a short video, and I don't know if I've shown this in here, but I thought it was super relevant. And there's no audio, but I did a quick search for a keyword that is related to our business model. So basically, this is me going into my phone and I type in digital transformation. The first 4 things that you see are ads. Now, there's a reason that Google is encouraging people to adjust their favicons, because they know that they have to show people that this is not an ad, this is organic. So the only way to really stand out as to whether or not you're an ad is to have a favicon. So they've deemed that to be a necessary part of SEO. We already have one at Value where we're good. So the first 4 things are ads. The next bunch are images. So I guess that's nice. There's images in there. Cool. What you then have here is the answer snippet. So that's kind of an organic taste. The idea is that Google controls whoever gets in the answer snippet, and generally you have to have a lot of authority. So if you're an early site and you don't have a lot of authority behind you, there's no fucking chance that you're going to get into that answer snippet. So we keep going, and then they serve up YouTube videos, because guess who owns YouTube? Google, right? Then they just throw you back down the fucking search rabbit hole, and if you start hitting people also ask, it pulls up another set of searches, which essentially puts you back into Google's ad network. Then they throw you into top stories, and that's Google News, right? And you have to be at least somewhat authoritative in order to get into Google News. They're trying to peel out more and more smaller publishers because they deem them to be less trustworthy, and I can see why, but it's still one of those things that you're going through Google. And then all the way down here, now you are halfway through scrolling, which took probably 1, 2, 3, 4 passes of your finger in order to finally get to the organic results, at which case you get 6 organic results. And then if you're on the second page, like, fuck off, you're screwed. Like, nobody's hitting the second page on this. And by the way, you missed it. They give you a chance to go back into people also asked at the bottom there, so they can throw you back into the mix. People also search for. It's super frustrating, and it's one of those things that my next slide really goes into a little bit of detail as to why that is. And I always say, if there's any question as to why somebody or an organization does something, the answer is follow the money. So I don't know, I can break this into 2 parts, and of course there's a reason that these searches are playing ball with really short form answers, because people want to be able to ask devices, smart home devices, a singular question and get a singular answer, because it's not like you're going to be able to hear multiple answers at the same time and choose. Eventually there needs to be one answer for every question, which is potentially a scary future when you think about it. So the facts, right? Out of Google getting 150 billion searches, and this is within Q1 of 2019, 48.96 of those were solved without a single click. So the idea is that you get these little answer snippets just like this, and you never actually go to a website, which for me turns me into this fucking kid, because I'm like, well, how am I supposed to rank for anything if I can never get anybody to actually come to my site? And by the way, they're pushing a ton of people to these paid ads, which we've all seen. And one of the other things that is on the next slide is, of course, the why behind the why. Ad revenue trends. Google generated $32.6 billion in advertising revenue in the second quarter, a 22% increase year over year. Obviously, they want money, right? I can't blame them for that, but it's affecting me now. Now I have a problem with that. The future of 0 clicks is going to happen, and of course, there's ways around this, and that's part of the reason of this presentation. But it's a scary future, and the idea is that I don't want to provide Google with more fucking revenue. I want people coming to me. And so there will be new channels and new opportunities in the future, but be aware that This is what's happening right now, and this is what all these major changes are leaning towards. So is this the end of organic growth? Of course not. That's ridiculous. If Google decided that they didn't want to give any type of web presence to anybody else who used their tools or their platforms, they would essentially crash the world economy. So it's not going to happen. But the idea is that these big changes have happened before. People freaked out for GDPR, and it wasn't as big of a deal as people made it out to be. The answer is growth hacking. So I wanted to show a couple of different things. I had originally kind of just jumped over the whole paid stuff, but I wanted to go into funnels. So I'm going to do a quick run over funnels. This is one funnel: attract, convert, close, and delight. It's one of the only funnels that includes the delight section. I really like delight because it's one of those things that I think phone companies and cable companies fuck up the most. The idea is that whenever, I don't know if you guys are like part of 3, but I always see like these new offers that come out where it's like, join 3 now and get like a deal that's way better than my fucking phone plan. And I'm like, cool. So I've been a customer with you for 8 years or 3 years or whatever it is. You don't care about me? And it's like, no, we already got your fucking money. The idea is that delight thing is actually something that marketers undervalue and is something that I can't wait to do another presentation on, but I got to move on. Here's another marketing funnel, which is probably one of the more common ones, the most simplest one: awareness, interest, decision, and action. And it's all how we basically generate something in the way of buzz. We get people coming back. We force them to make a decision, and hopefully the decision is, I'm buying. And I'll go into some details on that. And this is kind of more the traditional one. This is a blend of kind of the organic versus paid. And then there's one more, which is kind of a nice one if you're doing a lot more ad gen. So the idea is exposure, discovery. So people are starting to go, that is kind of what I'm looking for. And the searches are based off of that. Give them chances to consider while also hitting them over the head with more and more ads. Get them to convert. Build a relationship over something in the way of either email marketing or push notifications, and then turn them into advocates, cheerleaders, or people that provide referrals. That's where you actually get some real amazing stuff. And a mixture of delight kind of falls in here. So I'm breaking down each of these, but I need to move quickly because I could probably spend an hour on each. But the idea is like awareness, that top of funnel, awareness, I need to delete that. Exposure, discovery. This in ad form is a lot of the promotional shit that we see across our news feeds on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. The idea is that this is supposed to get people somewhat familiar with your product. So the best stuff that we produce turns into these downloadable guides where we can eventually try to put people into kind of the middle of the funnel. But every article that seems to do reasonably well, we're turning into ebooks. That's what Adriana's working on. Hannah, I think you're doing part of that too. So it's incredibly important to know, okay, this article did really well with organic. Let's get people to convert using the same content. I know it already exists on the blog, but you can download it right here if you give me your fucking email address, right? That's the idea. And there's a lot of people that do a terrible job at this, right? So like I have my language settings on my LinkedIn, yet Microsoft is still approaching me like I speak Danish, which is awesome. I appreciate it, but I don't. And there's a lot of different things that go into that. I do a ton of content on marketing, or content marketing, but I'm not going to go into detail. The consideration phase is a ton of fun. It's one of those things. I spoke with the head of marketing from Templify yesterday. You wouldn't believe how much money they spend on ads. So they're pushing the 3.5 million kroner mark every month, which is like, I mean, that's crazy, right? That's more money than we spend on the entire company over like the last 6 months.
What do they do?
They do templating software. So it's like software that allows you to brand your entire organization. I don't really get it. It seems kind of silly, but it's a strange business model that essentially allows people to use their logo across everything. That's about it. It's not that special, but they've gotten a lot of funding. So the idea is that you need about 8 impressions or 8 situations before you make a buying decision. I've seen numbers as high as 20. Generally, it's 8 to 20. The idea is that using either Google remarketing or Facebook remarketing, you can basically capture those that are coming to your site and hit them again. We've all been there, right? So if you're shopping for like shoes or a jacket, you see those ads everywhere. You can do the same thing with software. It's just having to decide what is the best use of money. If we had an unlimited source of money, we would just rank for everything because why the fuck not, right? But the idea is that some of these work better than others, and some of them actually require a bit more interaction. And there's a lot to that, but I think I want to go into kind of how you discern, how do you discern consideration in terms of like testing different campaigns. So it's all about finding your ideal customer profile. The idea is that who are the people that are most likely to buy my stuff, right? So if I'm selling shoes and maybe they're high heels, I'm not going to target men unless there's a certain type of dude that's into that, which I'm sure I could probably find other ways to target them. But the reality is I need to figure out, using different campaigns, what is getting a certain type of cohort, meaning a group of people super excited, engaged, and then actually converting. And the more experiments that you do, testing your assumptions, the better you get. And so there's so many different ways to do that. And I would love to spend an hour on that shit, but the idea is once you start uncovering the motives and what types of ad sets work with people, you're off to the races. In terms of converting, I mean, there's so many different platforms now to convert people, right? So like keeping people native in terms of using LinkedIn ads or lead ads, as they're called. Basically, Facebook and LinkedIn have those where they can put in their information on the site. That at least gets me a chance to be able to come back to them later. If I ask somebody to leave LinkedIn to come check out Valuer, 9 times out of 10, their bounce rate is through the roof. It's our best performing network besides organic, LinkedIn is, but the problem is it's so difficult to get somebody to go from I'm browsing LinkedIn, I'm checking this out, over to an article and keep them there. Because it's passive browsing. You're not actually looking for something, you're looking to be entertained. It's a different mindset. Some really cool native video conversion tools are out there. Alpha Voice is one of my old business partners' company. 23 is the local player. The idea is you can watch a video and then a screen pops up that basically says, give us your first name, last name, and firstborn son, and you can get access to the rest of the video, or we can get in touch with you and basically you'll have to beg us to leave you alone. There's tons of other conversion tools in terms of pop-ups. We use Convertful here. It's not perfect. There's notifications through PushCrew, who just got bought out by VWO, which is an A/B testing software. Unbounce is the most overpriced fucking tool in the world. It's like $1,200. And all it does is the exit pop-ups that we already have. It's crazy, but they were one of the first in the market to do it. Landing pages through everything from MailChimp in terms of forms, Contact Form 7. ConvertFox is actually quite nice. There's so many different tools out there. The idea is you want to capture people before they leave, give them a reason to capture them. Do you mind opening that window? It's going to get super warm in here. Last little bit is referrals, and I don't have...
I'm so small. I can't read stuff.
Yeah, I don't have enough time to go into referrals on this thing, but Valuer doesn't really focus on referrals just because it's such a one-off situation with us. But referrals are why Uber, Airbnb, and about a dozen other amazing large unicorn companies scaled. It's because if I get my friend to join the platform, he gets $5, and I also get $5. It was just a little psychology principle that worked amazingly well, and that's what scales businesses. Other ways to basically throw away a ton of money is influencers. I will never understand how influencers think they're worth something, but it is a thing. So there's a ton of different tools here to discover them. There's some really fun tools out there that I can go into in here at another time. I'm looking at buying some basic, they're Instagram accounts that are kind of fake, but they have a lot of followers and some engagement. So the idea is I'm tempted to buy that out and see what I can do with it. It's always fun to play, and I think there's so many different ways to go through that. One of the things that I think I really want to just touch on towards the end of this is understanding, and I know there's a shitload of stuff up here, the old school way of advertising. It's, newspapers, magazines, television. That stuff is going away. This is the first year, and I didn't even think this was happening In 2019, people are spending less on traditional models, newspapers, magazines, television, than they are on digital. And I figured that would have happened like 10 years ago, but apparently it's this year that the switch has finally changed from traditional to digital. And that goes to show you how fucking slow and behind a lot of these CMOs are. And I think it's really interesting to also note anytime that any of us are watching something, whether it's on our laptop or on Netflix, you probably have your phone in your hand anyways and aren't paying attention to the ads that are hitting the screen or any of the stuff that's flashing by there because we're so distracted all the time. So that's why targeting is super important. One of the things that I think it's incredibly helpful if you're just starting out is to understand your competitors and who's doing it right. So Big Spy is probably my favorite tool for understanding competitors and seeing what their ads look like, so you can see all of your competitors' ads across all the different platforms. They have a freemium model. Obviously, these guys are trying to make money. You can also do this in Ahrefs. Ahrefs allows us to see the keywords. You can't see if they're broad match or specific match, but the idea is that we can basically steal our competitors' text directly out of Ahrefs if we had the fucking money to spend on ads, but we don't. So yeah, just something to pique interest. And there's a million other ways around this as well. Built With is a super interesting tool that allows you to see what types of tools your competitors are using or even your customers. So you can reach out and say, hey, I saw that you're not using this. Would you like to use us instead? It really depends. I love that GIF. Really depends on the situation, but it's neither here nor there. All right, so now jumping into the stuff that I really wanted to talk about. Approach to content, right? The idea is that the future of content is going to be very different from what it looks like today, and I'll explain why. But the red pill and the blue pill, it's one of those things you don't really have an option because you can't fight what's coming, and I'm going to show what's coming. So SEO 2.0, this is a concept brought on by Brian Dean. I've shown this kind of concept a while ago. The concept is the meaningful engagement or the user intent based off of a piece of content. So why do I write something if I have no reason for the people to actually engage with it? And it falls into these categories. So if somebody is actually doing a search, are they looking for information? What is the capital of Denmark? If somebody is doing navigational, they're trying to find a location online, right? Really basic stuff. Commercial is where we sit, and the idea is like somebody's trying to find a tool for corporate innovation. And transactional, they're trying to basically do the same thing, but it's where to buy or apartments in, it's that type of thing. So these two are very similar, but the idea is both looking for different things. You can imagine why this could be solved by an answer snippet, but this one is probably not going to be solved by an answer snippet. How are you supposed to list all the apartments in Denmark within that short little box? It's not possible. So there's always going to be different types of searches, and the single answer won't solve everything. Skyscraper technique. Does anybody in here not know what that is? Because I've talked about it like 1,000 times. Okay, cool. So the skyscraper technique was essentially based off of the old days in New York City. Due to the constraints of engineering at the time, everybody was really only able to build up their skyscrapers to a certain level. So all the buildings were about the same height, and it meant something back in the day to have the tallest building in all of New York City. So some smart people started saying, well, if I put a giant fucking flagpole on top of my skyscraper, I get to tell the world I have the tallest building in all of New York. Fuck you, the tallest building in the whole world. And so that's what people did. So you have a ton of these giant flagpoles on top of their building. We're doing content much the same way here. So we find an article that works across one of our competitors or somebody that's in our niche. And so we say, I'd like to do a better version of that. We've been skyscraped over here at Valuer. So our article, the one that performs the best, the 50 examples of corporations that failed to innovate, a little company called CB Insights, they're kind of competitors. They sort of are. I guess they are. They basically built 100 products from corporations that failed. And they're stealing keywords from us because they're like, hey, that article works for them. Let's do our own version of it. And there's a million different ways to find these. I use Ahrefs, and I can show on a different time how to do that. But the idea is basically finding stuff that already does a really good job in terms of capturing keywords and making a better version of it. It's like taking your competitor's soccer team, taking their best player out of the game and making him play for you. It's crazy. So in the new world of the skyscraper technique 2.0, this is stuff that we've started instituting in ValueWork. So we want to focus on intent and try to serve up what users are expecting to see given the title of the post. We've added a table of contents for everything. Part of the reason for that is we're trying to get into the answer snippets. This is where the answer snippets are filled in because all of these have to be in H2, generally not in H3. So H2 or H3, these are the title tags. So the idea is that anything that follows a title tag might actually have the right answer. That's why a lot of those title tags need to either have example of or a question or something that's very direct and short. Internal versus external linking, it seems to be never going away, but the idea is citing more reliable sources even than your own, and also internally linking to things that are related to your article. And then skimmability, user experience. So if you go to backlinko.com, tons of visuals. It's almost like a child's storybook. There's so much visual stuff in there. We're visual by nature. Everything is visual these days. That's why we don't have mile-long paragraphs, right? Like it needs to be skimmable if I was on a phone. So a little additional stuff. This is always subject to change, but I'm still seeing it to be the case. The idea is longer content gets results. Our longest article is close to 10,000 words. It's the corporations that failed to innovate, and that is the most engaged article that brings in the most people. And these graphics demonstrate that in terms of the position and the number of words in the article. Longer shit works. And until somebody shows me something that is actually backed up with real data, I won't believe you. It's just, that's what's happening. Better titles. There's so many different title generators out there. I would generally go in and demonstrate how this works. This was a screenshot after I did a presentation for Google, and I was asking somebody in the audience to give me like a business model or a type of thing they sell, and somebody goes, t-shirts. So I plugged t-shirts as a generic term into this, and then it was, 7 reasons why you're a rookie in t-shirts. And I'm like, the fuck? 5 things nobody told you about t-shirts. I would click on that article because I want to know, like, what is it that I don't know about that? It grabs you. And I would love to see more of that stuff in-house in terms of value. Including everything. So you'll see that we have blog posts with memes, we have blog posts with GIFs. We've learned how to make GIFs in MP4s as opposed to pulling and embedding them from Giphy because it slows everything down. We do tons of visuals, as Adriana and Hannah know. There's tons of everything. The idea is to hit every different medium, give people a chance to engage, share, all that good stuff. That's why we add maps in there. And one of the hardest things that I think we always battle with is finishing strong. Because when you get to paragraph number 50 within an 8,000 word article, at that point you just want to move on. You don't want to continue to write that fucking article because it's the last thing you want to look at, because I'm sure you've been there, right? Like, it's so boring. It's like, I've been looking at this topic for the last 3 weeks. I want something else. And the hard part is that's where people end up kind of falling off, is you can tell when somebody's phoning it in and writing shit content. So I wanted to show a few different examples of people that have gotten something right, and whether it was inadvertent or on purpose, who knows? But the idea is that blogs are falling behind, but resource sections are picking up. And there's a reason for that. And again, I'm kind of foreshadowing what's to come, but the idea is that resource sections work because it's people seeking quick answers, or they're trying to find a solution. So the idea is that you use simple, short titles. The descriptions are jam-packed with the same keywords, so there's a lot of keyword stuffing going on. People want to get a template for, a guide for. These are what we've been struggling to get out inside of Valuer, and that's why we've been writing descriptions of them. And I'm really trying to get that page off the ground, and I'll show you guys why. I think I've shown during a few different morning meetings. But the idea is that a lot of these also end up in these answer snippets, which is super valuable. So in a normal situation, I would pull up the website and Alt-Tab and back and forth. But Talent Lift is a company that came out of nowhere. They basically provided, inside of their resources section, templates and job descriptions, and it's basically a clusterfuck of keyword stuffing. So it's it's crazy how well they're ranking for everything, and they've done a really nice job with that. Nova Resume is a local player. They first gained a big amount of notoriety by putting out an article about Elon Musk's resume. The idea is the dude doesn't need a resume, but this is what captured Time Magazine or Time.com or whatever it was, and then it just got flooded to a bunch of other news outlets, which boosted their authority, which then allowed them to rank for a ton of other keywords. I mean, these guys are at the top for crazy keywords. Of course, it bounces around, but resume templates, being number 4 on that anywhere in the world is pretty crazy. And it's a company that wasn't around 2.5 years ago. You know, they're barely 2 years old. So crazy, they're doing an awesome job with that. 24 slides, got drunk with their head of marketing, Philip. Really bright guy, great mind, growth hacking type of dude. And they basically have doubled down on templates, giving away templates, but then grabbing people's emails. Basically, you give me your first name and email, and you get the template for free. That's what we're trying to do here. It just takes forever to build these things. But I do think that the URL tweak is something that we should look at. So the idea is that they use the URL present better. If you look back over at Talent Lift, they're basically doing the same. Talent Lift. They call their kind of subcategory career blog. The idea is that Google is punishing people that use /blog/ whatever the title is, /article/ whatever it is. And I think I know why. Last little bit is Propeller. And I had a chance encounter with a super bitchy PR person that wrote me back based off of our amplification. She goes, just a little bit of feedback. Your email signature is really intense, and it's so distracting it takes away from me reading the actual email. And also, like, who starts a sentence like that? And also, while I appreciate the pitch, you didn't actually say what you want me to do with that article. Just read it, and it's like, I can tell you what to do with the article. You know, like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I come to find out, Propeller only has 2 full-time employees, and they're killing it in terms of traffic. And the idea is that they've hired out third parties for everything. So this person is a third-party PR agent. But they've done a really good job in terms of thought leadership and getting articles out into the major publishers, which is something I'd love to see more of in Valuer. Getting published in TechCrunch is on akin to winning the lottery. It's so difficult to do. And that's why I've tried to bribe TechCrunch writers, and it hasn't worked. So we'll see. You know, it's like, hey, would you like to take a trip out to Denmark? I'll buy your ticket. No answer. All right, so why are blog articles ranking less? This is the question that I've been dancing around, and it's super important. It's because the content game is changing. So in May of 2016, there was roughly 59 million articles published. In May of 2018, there were 87 million articles published. Think about how much time it takes us to just go live with 1 article a week. Now put that across the entire internet, and you're realizing that you're competing in a smaller and smaller pool of people that are trying to rank for shit. Eventually, it's going to become so difficult to rank that you can't really get by doing organic. So that's what's coming, and that's scary as shit, right? And there's a reason for that, right? So this is kind of the old school way of ranking. They were called PBNs, Publisher Blog Networks. The whole concept is that I could essentially build lots of little sites, so tier 2 sites, that were just made of spun content. Spun content means it didn't actually read like real language. It was horse, generic giraffe, fights lion, and then sentence ends, and then another sentence. Super bizarre, no real relational words, but chock full of keywords. And the idea was that they would point to secondary, tertiary, that's what tertiary blogs that were a little more valuable, and then they point to your site. So you're basically building these huge backlink pyramids that are pointing towards different parts of your site. A lot of work and a different way to be able to actually boost your authority. Takes a lot of time, but Google's like, no, fuck that. Like, nothing in these sub-articles is readable. It's all junk, it's all fake. So Google came out with a couple of different updates to Panda, and basically all that shit is wiped out. So never invest in a PBN. The idea is marketers were trying to take advantage of shit, Marketers ruin everything. It's a big theme out of Gary Vaynerchuk. But the idea is that if you are providing junk content, it no longer works. So here's the future, and here's what we'll be battling with in the coming couple of years. AI content writers are already around us, right? So there was an article that came out a few months back. It was back in February. It's called OpenAI. It was a project of Elon Musk. I don't know if it was a chance for him to try to get a little bit of PR, but he's like, oh, it's too dangerous to release. But he's also the guy that does get up in front of people on stage and say, if we don't start looking at AI more seriously, our society is doomed. And I can see kind of why this would eventually end up fucking up everything when it comes to online content and Google having to rethink everything. The idea is that AI right now can create lengthy posts that are readable to you and I, and the only reason that it's been held off is because somebody doesn't feel good about it. I don't think that's going to last, and the reality is it doesn't, because I found a couple of places where like, oh, well, we got access to it, so here it is, fuck up the world. So it's out there if you have to look for it. So Persado is a company that basically says they can increase conversion rates using AI, and basically they're working with giant companies as is. So 44 Fortune 500 companies plus 250 plus others are spending $3,000 a month to basically have AI write all of their page content for all of their websites. So the idea is that you don't really even need marketers anymore, right? So if I know that the highest amount of converting traffic comes through this page, I know that I can test these 5 different CTAs, and every time this one works, use that with all of the other sites that are gaining information about these, and I will fuck everybody else up. The idea is that these write better ads, better text, better copy than any one human alive, and that's because it's pulling apart all the historical data. Imagine if you only focused on one thing for the last 50 years, and then you cloned you, and then they focused on one thing. It all is cyclical, and that's what's happening right now. And whether or not you have a feeling about it doesn't matter, because it's fucking money. So you're seeing giant conversion rates out of this. So I don't know how much I believe. They're saying an average click-through rate is 68%, which, fuck you, that's not even real. Like, that's not possible. But they are saying a 78% boost or 76% boost on average. So if you don't think it's real, it's already happened, right? So if you recognize any of these names, they already have admitted to using AI. The Washington Post, company I used to work for, last year wrote 850 stories purely using AI, right? It's happened, and it will continue to happen. And the idea is, why would a news organization want to do this? Because the first person to put out a story wins. That's it. So if I know that I need to be first to market, rather than having, hey, Bob, I need you to churn out something quick on that shooting out in Texas. Or I could maybe feed in a few different details and then have Bob maybe go in and correct some of the things that didn't make sense. And then all of a sudden I'm first to market and everybody's clicking on my shit. That's happening right now. And by the way, sports, like, I'm not a huge sports guy, but it shouldn't be very difficult to like automate that. Like, come on. So the idea is like that shit's already going down. And the idea is, think about it like the introduction of submarines in World War I, right? The British looked at the Germans using submarines as uncivilized, and the only way to pronounce this word, you have to do it with a British accent, ungentlemanly, and a form of Navy guerrilla warfare. Submarines were considered cheating, but everybody started using them because, like, well, fuck, we got to keep up with the Joneses. So the reality is there's no Navy out there that doesn't exist without submarines, because that's what you have to do. In the future, there will be no publisher that exists without AI. We have to be aware that that is what's coming. So let's bake a cake, right? So the idea is we have some ingredients to work with. Let's see what we can do in terms of baking a cake. The idea is I know that I can find the keywords that I need for my niche. I know that I can generate some interesting titles. I know that there's already a number of AI writing tools out there that are good enough. And I know that I can use spinners to actually make the content tweakable so that it passes Copyscape. So essentially breaking the industry as we know. Right, so I want to do this real quick because just like every cooking show where like they show somebody making everything in front of you, they have to put it in the oven, then they take one out that's already done. I kind of have to do the same thing. So I'm going to pull up the Spinner site, and it is AI Writer. And by the way, we're never going to be able to compete with their pricing. If you had to guess how much an AI article costs to be written, any ideas? Ballpark? It's $1. Yeah, it's $1. Yeah, right? So 10 pieces of content for $10, right? So, yeah. So
have you seen any of those articles? They're good articles.
yeah, of course, they're great articles. So we can do one now. I just want to make sure I have enough credits for tomorrow. So let's say corporate startup, like corporate innovation labs and startups. And I will write the article.
No.
Single click, right? And it takes, well, this search will take, I guess it's more keywords, so it'll take 5 minutes. So yeah, the ingredients are beginning and they're in the oven, right? So that's the part where I have to bake. Right, so something to bear in mind is Copyscape is a tool that we use in here to make sure that some of the third-party writers that we use aren't giving a shit. And when this thing actually does pull up information, it's pulling from other sources. The idea is it's over 340 million articles that are in existence, so it needs to pull information from somewhere. Nothing is essentially unique with this just yet. It's still too rudimentary. So there are other tools that we can use to check to see if they're original, but for now, Copyscape is kind of what we use. I'm sure there's better tools out there that are far more expensive, but it's kind of the industry standard. So when the article does get spit out, you're given a chance to use the spinner internally. A spinner basically picks out words that have synonyms that you can swap them out. So I can fool Google into knowing that this article, because I swapped out every second spun word, they're never going to know that this was actually taken from a Forbes article, Harvard Business Review, and 10 other well-known, reputable publishers because I kept changing all the fucking words. So like a synonym for sector is industry. Changing turns to shifting, or introduction turns to debut, or that is turns to that's. It's simple enough to cheat, right? And that's like the fun part. So the idea is that I'm able to tweak everything almost in real time if I wanted to go through on a human level, or just say, pick every 3, whatever, like go for it. And you can also do that. So the idea is I can have 1,000 words written in 5 minutes that is relevant enough and passes Copyscape like that. And the idea is that if you have a deluge of content, meaning a shitload of content coming from all of these publishers, those numbers that we saw before in terms of like the 68 million articles in 2018 turns into 68 trillion by 2020. And there is no standing out in that environment. It's filling a room with clones that, you're trying to hear the one person that's whispering. It's not possible. So that's what we're up against in the future. And there's also other things, right? Because what's a cake without frosting? So I go into Lumen 5. We stopped using Lumen 5 for good reason. And the idea was that I'm convinced that that's why our YouTube channel was banned. I would say some of the people are here that are newer, but Lumen 5 essentially constructed a video out of taking the text and matching a picture with the text and then laying it over very easily. And I have my example in here. But the idea is, of course, we skipped the step of adding audio behind it. So this is what it looks like. And, it's little titles over top. It looks kind of real because, there's pictures and video of people doing things. If we were to use a text-to-talk application and generate that based off of the text that's in there, this might actually look and feel like a real video. We could add a soundtrack and keep it jazzed up. But we found inside of Valuer that nobody was actually watching these because it is kind of weak and it's super boring. So I don't know, maybe in the future they'll figure out how to make this more interesting by generating fake looking people. You know, the idea is that if it's a real talking head person and they're providing real examples and screenshots, who's to say that doesn't feel like a real video that somebody actually generated? Which means the videographers in the room are out of work, you know, and that's coming too. Think about the aging app, right? It has half of our faces in here because your fucking brother or your friend was like, oh, let's see what you look like old. Your face could be explaining a video in the future and you have no idea. And that's coming, right? You've all seen deepfake where it's like, oh, it's Joe Rogan or I don't know, whoever else. There's been so many different like funny versions of them. But that's how you essentially have a version of this on steroids. And that's coming like super quickly. And whether or not this eventually leads to like Hollywood movies being AI generated, I don't know. Anything's possible at this point, but that would be really, really exceptional. So I'm gonna see if my cake is ready. It is. And it gives you the ability to see based on kind of like I can delete the lines, but I'm gonna take the rewritten version. So leaders in all industries are beginning to realize the importance of setting up innovation laboratory frameworks to achieve the strategic goals. Others do this to enter into strategic partnerships or test novel technologies. Some companies may open an innovation lab to develop new business models to find new ways to redesign the customer experience. That's not bad, right? That's shit. I'm like, all right, put that in the blog. You know, like that's real. And by the way, it's 1,000 fucking words of this. So it's enough that it's probably going to be manageable from the standpoint of like, this is usable and this is enough to grab keywords. I already did this and basically used the spinner. I think I'm skipping ahead on my... yeah, I essentially did this and I'll go into this afterwards, but the idea is that you can see my final version of basically taking it, putting it through the spinner, and then hand editing just a touch for 15 minutes, and it's a perfectly good usable article. One of the things that I've shown in here and I will show during the Tech Festival is the whole way that you have counter measures that are going against this. And it's it's Google's job to basically figure out how do they combat this? How are you possibly going to stop all of these articles from flooding the market and essentially making all content worthless? And that's kind of the $1 million question, right? So this is a video I've shown in here before. It's a guy who's called Smarter Every Day.
The content was essentially the same, it was just arranged in a different way.
So before it gets too far ahead, basically he found content that was spun. It was using a tool probably similar to like InVideo, very similar to Lemon 5, that was launching different versions of the same content with the same audio, but different pictures, essentially flooding YouTube and grabbing people eventually with the right sequence.
Different B-roll, different title screens. I'm a YouTuber and I spend some time thinking about content ID systems and things like that. It is clear to me that these manipulations of the video and even the audio are attempts to get around YouTube's automated recognition system. So let me explain how this works. YouTube engineers look at the individual pixels on a video and then they use the values of these pixels to perform some type of mathematical function, which gives you a number called a hash. You then compare hashes to other videos that have been uploaded and try to figure out if the same content has been uploaded by someone else in the past. The challenging task here is to make a system that's fast enough to find exact copies of specific frames of video across the entire YouTube library, while at the same time make it smart enough to not be tricked. How did you do that with math? Instead of sampling every pixel, what if they sample specific spots on every video and measure the color values at those specific locations? They can then compare those spots with every other video uploaded to YouTube. But think about what happens if a sneaky person resizes those images. The colors would change at those locations. The same thing would happen if you rotate the image or flip it. it, or even apply a filter of some kind. Now, I don't know how YouTube samples these pixels, or the audio from the video, or what mathematical they use, but I know that's like a company secret, because that's how they defend the platform. If the bad guys were to figure out how these detection algorithms work, then they can get around them and they can beat the defenses. If you look at these crazy videos like a software engineer, you can start to see some really interesting details. For example, why would there be a globe spinning in this image? Well, if you think about it, that's going to change the hash. What if the YouTube engineers figured the globe trick out and then they shut that technique down? Well, in this video, the globe is mirrored. That's going to change the hash in a different way. This specific instance is...
So we created videos using Lumen 5, which pulled in all of the same B-roll type footage. And so if this was actually going live and flagging videos that had B-roll that came from Lumen 5, because that's where a lot of the scam artists are generating their videos, because guess what? I got it for free too. Then the idea is like, cool, so any video that contains these 4 pixels all in a row over a span of 10 seconds, 2 seconds, half a second, you're out, and the account is banned. That's how we got started.
Countermeasure, which is fascinating. This one is probably my favorite. Why on earth would they put virtual snow falling over the top of a video of the royal family? If you think about it, this changes the math in a kind of random way, and therefore YouTube's ability to detect it. This is like a new form of camouflage that's using math instead of colors on this new bot battlefield where daily fights take place by opposing forces of software engineers. But instead of fighting over hills or pieces of land, the winner of these individual skirmishes gets a few moments of your time, which in today's attention economy is super valuable.
So that gives you an indicator of how detailed it's gotten, and that's also, again, why I think we got screwed on YouTube. And does it mean that you have to pass some type of validation to become a content creator in the future? Maybe, but there's a lot to that. So again, if you want to see the results, I have my download page, taylorryan.io/AI. And you can see what the article that was spun looks like, and you can see a bunch of other stuff. The idea is that, oh no, not from the beginning. Damn it. Hold on, bear with me. Okay. The idea is that this was just one recipe, right? And there's lots and lots of different cakes out there, right? So I made my cake with some pretty simple ingredients, but maybe you want chocolate cake. Or maybe you want cake made with, what's that shit that, it's like a sugar substitute, but it's really bad? Sativa. I can't remember. What is it?
Salvia.
Sclavia? What?
Salvia.
Salvia. No, that's the stuff you smoke.
No,
Okay.
it's actually a herb. It's actually a herb.
Yeah, sativa. Yeah, the type of weed. Yeah, so the idea is it really depends on what you're using, right? And so there's tons of tools out there. So this is a look at all the marketing tools that were available in 2011. We jump forward a few years, 2014, and then the next year is 2019. You need a fucking magnifying glass to get going in there, right? And that's right now, right? Imagine 4 years from that, and it's going to really be absolutely ridiculous. It'll look like one of those pieces of artwork where it's all pixelated with different paintings inside of it. You're never going to be able to keep up with the pace of technology. You just need to learn enough to be able to understand what this is. And I don't claim to be an expert on any of this stuff. I think I know enough to make me dangerous. But the reality is, I don't think any one person will be able to keep up with all these things. So you need to understand the full landscape and understand what is possible. And there will be people that are left behind. That's just the nature of how things are. So at this point, I would probably give people a bit of a break because I've hit almost my hour mark, but let's keep... Do you guys need a break or are we good? Cool? Okay. So I wanted to show a couple of quick hacks because I showed versions of this over at the Hype Sports Innovation webinar. It's a mouthful. But the idea was that a lot of people are mystified by outbound. Outbound is when you're reaching out to people directly. Think of like cold emailing. Versus inbound is where people come directly to you because you have great content. Now, I'm well aware that HubSpot does all this shit that I'm about to explain, but I can't afford HubSpot, right? I'm like this fucking kid over here with the janky old bike, and this is some rich kid that had, a rich dad say, hey, here's a aerodynamic helmet for a kid's bicycle race. Fuck that family. But the idea is that essentially you have options, and if you're like Valuer, we're bootstrapped. So we have to figure out what is the most that we can do with the least amount of money. And so we cobble together stuff. So the tool that we use is called Lead Feeder, but there's other versions of this. I can't even go to Albatross anymore. Albatross is this really phenomenal tool that basically they have a call center waiting for people to go and call you as soon as you visit their fucking website. So like, I get calls from these guys within 30 seconds because it's fed into an automated email or automatic calling system. So let's jump in. Lead Feeder essentially allows you to grab people's IP address based on what is inside of analytics, and then using some really clever software, be able to establish what is the closest possible address to this IP address, and then figuring out, is there a business located at this address? If yes, see if there's any information on this company, i.e. company name, address, phone number, company emails. So you're essentially enriching enough data based off an IP address. This is how people get swatted, right? Has everybody heard of that phrase, swatted? No? So like the idea is like you're playing video games and you're dropping curse words and N-words on like Call of Duty, and then cops show up at your house because somebody called the police in your local area and said, there's somebody inside, they're holding my wife hostage, send the SWAT team right away. And of course they break down the door and it's some guy playing video games and masturbating going, what are you doing here? But people have been killed by that, because you as a police officer are entering an environment that you assume is a hostage situation. And that's happening like right now. So yes, you can find out people's home address based off of IP, and you can gather IP based off of analytics. So, so put that in your pipe and smoke it. It's just something to be aware of. Right? So the idea is that I know that I can get email addresses for all the companies that come to visit my site, so why not hit them at the right time when they visited my pricing page? If you are visiting a pricing page, you're not looking at it because you're bored, you're looking at it because you're curious. Curious is good enough. That's a maybe in my book, right? So the idea is like, cool, let me either directly reach out to you saying, hey, we have some internal tracking software. Normally it's just for our own clients. This is really weird. Your name came up. Any idea? Were you guys on our site, Valuer.ai? All of a sudden you're in that conversation. Let me tell you about Valuer while I got you on the phone. I've had that happen to me via the dickheads over at Albatross and Lead Forensics. And they are super aggressive, but it works. It got me talking to them, so it definitely works. You can also automate this with email. It totally makes sense, but the idea is that anybody can set up a Zapier account and essentially automatically hit anybody that stops by a certain page. Now, everybody freaks out about GDPR compliance. Yes, it is totally legal to do this, right? It must be a business email that you're reaching out to. You must allude to how you acquired their email, which is, we have some software that we use to track internally, which is kind of true. You must have a business case, so I can't reach out and be like, hey, I'm selling Viagra. That's not how it works. You have to say, I know that you're a business and you guys are potentially looking for something like this as a solution. This really only works with B2B, obviously. And you have to provide a physical address somewhere in the bottom of the email. And then you give them an unsubscribe pathway. So yeah, granted, we bury ours, right? So like you hit enter about 20 times in your amplification emails, so people can't figure out how to unsubscribe unless they scroll way down the email. Just a little clever way of getting around it. But it is totally compliant, and a lot of Danes are very apprehensive about doing it because it's not really in their culture. A lot of people freak out about getting spammed, and I understand that, but that's not what drives me. So how do we make this manual? Lead Feeder gives you 7 days worth of access. So I could potentially find virtual assistants for $4 an hour and say, go in every Tuesday and make phone calls to everybody in there and show me the log of what happened. I can also use automated calling like Just Call. So any Indian scammer is familiar. I'm sure there won't be any in the audience, but the idea is you can just feed in there and so it automatically dials. And basically anytime that somebody is on the site, they get dialed, maybe through the general number. There's a lot of different ways to do that. You could email them off of Upwork, or you could set up Zapier and do it the same way. So yeah, crazy, right? So outbound hacks. I've gone over this a bunch in here, but this is what I kind of showed Abhi how to do over in sales. And the idea is that there's kind of 4 different main areas to focus on. So we need to target who are the people that we want to reach. If we're sending out outbound emails completely cold, we need to basically figure out a list of decision makers and segment it. We need to find out the email addresses to be able to reach them. We need to validate those emails to make sure we're not ending up in the spam folder. And then we need to make sure that we have an automated system that sequences the outreach, because I'm not manually sending one email at a time. No fucking way. So targeting, really simple. There's manual elements of this, and Yuri, Kiara, and Anna and I have done a fair amount of this. In terms of figuring out job titles of people that might actually be in a decision-making role, we have to build that. And that is manual, it takes time. But the idea is if you take a structured approach and say, by industry, all these job titles, or by country, all these job titles, and by certain types of technology, all these job titles, that's where you get these really cool lists that you can test. And you can see, okay, I know that chief digital officers tend to convert better in terms of open rates when I send out these emails. So either let me try different open rates or let me try a different job type. Discovery, basically where to find working emails. I think a lot of people that have done SEO in here have done this before. There are so many free tools out there. Hunter is probably one of the most common ones that people know, but it is what it is. The idea is, yes, it's GDPR compliant. Yes, you can do that. We need to verify the emails. Never bounce is probably my favorite. Clear out is the new kid on the block, and it's super cheap and really inaccurate, but it works. Yeah, it's just a different way of basically making sure that you're not getting bounces. The more bounces you get, the more likely it is that your domain will basically enter a blacklist, and that means you don't get into their inbox, you always end up in their spam folder. Excuse me. So outreach is all about sequencing, right? So email 1 goes out immediately, email 2 is 2 or 3 days later, email 3 is a week later. And all the messaging is kind of different. Excuse me. We use merge fields to make it feel like it's personalized. You have to test out subject lines, different types of stuff. You can track everything either in Lemlist or Snov. We use BuzzStream here for amplification, but it all works the same way. And then the last little bit is I want to make sure that I'm tracking everything and feed everybody into a CRM. CRM is basically customer retention management software. The idea is I want to know who converted and who actually went to that landing page and signed up, so then I can say, hey, let's get this guy actually into a buying situation. Takes time, a lot of tools out there. We use Pipedrive over at Valuer. Pipedrive is my favorite. Salesforce is super fucking expensive. I think right now it's $85 per license, and that's without all the fixings. It goes up to like $200 per license. It's absurd, and if we had the money, yeah, we'd be using it because it's a great tool. But I mean, it's crazy expensive. And then the last little bit is, let's say we do actually end up converting them into customers, then we need to make sure that we're hitting them on a regular basis based on lack of entries into the platform, or maybe it seems like they're having difficulties. Intercom is kind of industry standard, and it's wildly overpriced. So I got on there. This is how all these assholes do it, right? So I got on their startup plan, and it allows you to get like 50 emails in the system, and then it jumps up to $400. So it's like, yeah, $50 a month, it's a great deal, And then a month later, it's like, how did I get a bill for $400? And they're like, oh, you had more than 50 people in your system. So yeah, it's a real clever bait and switch type of thing. You can use Mixpanel to be able to actually use Segment to actually get more insights into what customers are doing in your platform. Again, this is mostly software as a service. There's tons of templates out there. One of the ones that I see every 3 to 4 months that comes to me is It's basically a 3-line email with that picture, and it's like, I know I've emailed you a couple of times, but maybe it's because, number one, you're not interested. Number two, you're just too busy. Number three, you're being chased by a hippo and you need somebody to call for help. Humor works, but it's one of those things where it's like, dude, be fucking original. Like, I've seen this so many times. It's just, we all follow maybe the same blog posts, but there are so many great techniques. I really like up there on the upper right, see how that text is changing? You can basically do a version of this where it's somebody pointing at a whiteboard and, you know, we wrote your name on the whiteboard. People are like, well, my name's my name. You know, I'll respond to this. And it works. And it's like absolutely absurd. It takes no time. So Lemless has that set up, and it's really nice. It's really easy. And it's great. So rounding out the last little bit here, I have finally secured, because I was going to shit on Tech Barbecue. I really fought last year to try to get on stage, because I do think that when you're on stage, people tend to remember you better than if you're just walking around handing out business cards. So I begged, and they're like, yeah, we'll definitely see what we can do. And then, of course, like the night before, they're like, yeah, fuck you, we got nothing. And Value spent a lot of money to go to that. And I think we only got, Dennis was on like one of the outside stages, like close to the hot dog stand that we were running. The whole thing was absolutely absurd, and I was super frustrated. So I was like, this fucking year, you need to give us some stage time. And as of today, they finally agreed. But yeah, I was going to actually shit on them over at Tech Festival. But come see me now. So I'm on the second day.
Oh.
So my topic is kind of interesting. And I think as I like to do it, it's got some controversy to it. So if you had to guess what all these brands had in common, any guesses in general? Like all these brands have one thing in common.
Global?
That is true. Yes, they are global. Well, the answer is they all have ditched their CMOs. So all of these companies no longer have a CMO working for them, which means that the CMO job title is becoming less valuable because it doesn't require anything to be a CMO these days. And I encourage you, if you start to go out and meet people at these networking events, you start to ask them pointed questions about marketing, or maybe it's something really related to, I don't know, content or AI and content or analytics or any tools. Most of these fuck jobs have no idea, because generally they're in like mid to late 40s, which means they graduated college by the time the internet was really a thing. Where it's like, cool, so you like missed like everything. And then the other side of it is they've gotten fat and happy with doing nothing. And so it's super frustrating to see that, but the reality is 70% of Fortune 500 companies have gotten rid of their, wait, let me make sure that's right. 70% of Fortune 500 have one at the corporate level. Here we go. 70% of Fortune 500 companies still have a CMO, but it's down from 74% in 2009. The idea is like, this is super recent. Uber was like one of the more recent ones. They also fired 400 marketers. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was like last month. It's like, how do you, Uber, like how do you have 400 marketers?
Yeah.
But it's a real thing. And the idea is like, you have too many bullshit artists, too many cooks in the kitchen. So like I'll Google.
Then they outsource it, right?
Of course. I mean, that's how you save money. Employees. So yeah, Uber lays off 400 employees from the marketing team. How the fuck do you have 400 employees on the marketing team? Like, can you imagine managing that? It's not possible.
From 1,200.
Yeah.
And they,
To 800. Still, 800. Like, what are you doing with 800 employees in the marketing team? Like, that's crazy, right? So the idea is that, excuse me, you have a ton of bullshit artists at the very top that close their eyes when they talk, and it's becoming a place of snake oil salesmen and women and bullshit artists. So like one of the videos that I'm tempted to kind of show, but it's really throwing somebody under the bus, is this lady that was the CMO of Goldman Sachs. Does anybody recognize the name Goldman Sachs? So like they were, during the financial crisis, basically the first company to come out where it's like, these guys fucked everybody. They fucked up the economy. Fuck those clowns, right? That's a reason I couldn't get a job for the better part of like the first 4 years out of college, because they screwed up the economy. So the lady's up there and she's like, you know, we had a real PR thing to work on. So I did what any good marketer would do, and I got creative. And so she explains that she created the first LinkedIn profile for the company, like a company profile. And it's like, lady, do you have any, and this is in 2017, this interview's happening, and she's like, doggone it, I know my marketing. And it's like, lady, any fucking kid that's, has a smartphone can create a company profile. Like, do not hang your hat on that. But that's the reality, and you have a lot of that happening across every business. And these people are missing the wave. It's the same thing that's happening inside of Valuer. You have people that have kind of learned to basically hang their hat on the stuff that they did ages ago, and it's no longer relevant. Technology is changing so fast that if you aren't keeping up with it, if you're not constantly learning, you're screwed. Has anybody seen Zoolander? Fuck. God, everybody's so young.
Yes, I've seen it.
Okay, good. Jesus. So I showed this this GIF that it took me like 10 minutes to fucking create because I had to track down this thing. But in the movie, this is Mugatu, and he's like the evil guy. Obviously, looks like one. And he's trying to explain how important he is in the world of fashion because he was the original inventor of the piano key necktie, which is the tackiest fucking thing in the world, right? So you have these people that are like, I made billions of dollars off of newspapers, billboards, and magazines. I know marketing. It's like, yeah, but that shit's no longer relevant. Like, nobody gives a shit about billboards. Nobody even looks at billboards anymore because they're looking at their fucking phones. You don't know anything. You're lame. You're a relic of the past. And the problem is that's who are making the decisions, right? So it's happening now where there needs to be either a re-understanding and a reimagining of what is to be and what marketing really is, or you're going to have a lot of companies that continue to fail, which gives opportunities to startups, which is great, and it's part of our evolution, but it's also kind of Valuer's job to help that and say, you guys need MarTech, marketing tech, or you need to start hiring people that know their fucking way around who aren't just middle managers. I genuinely believe Don Draper would be a fucking homeless guy today. Does anybody know who Don Draper is?
No.
Damn! Don Draper was in the show Mad Men. Mad Men was like this phenomenal show that was like for 10 seasons. And it's basically about a executive on Madison Fifth Avenue. So like in the 60s, Madison Fifth Avenue, that was where the marketers were. That's where if you had a brain for marketing, you were in the center of the universe. And the idea is like this show is basically highlighting him where he's like, I smoke Camels because I love my life, and it's like, oh, that's an ad campaign, great, and it's like, all right, that's not really marketing though. Like we all can come up with like clever shit and like one-liners. That's not hard to do. Give this room of people 3 hours and I guarantee you we could churn out a million different strategies and a million different concepts. But what real marketing is going to be is doing the work and facilitating. And it's hands-on. It's not just, hey, idea guy. Like, no, you're going to be a fucking bum if you're an idea guy. You need to be an executor. You need to understand how to integrate these tools. You need to understand data, and you can't go off of just gut feelings. So the idea is that's the future of what we're looking at in terms of everybody in this room. If you decide to pursue marketing as a career, this is what you have to be aware of, is like it's becoming a technical game, and it goes from experience, making a lot of different tests, and finding out what works, and then basing those for your next set of experiments. And also understanding how to integrate tools. All that stuff is the future. And that'll be 20 minutes of me shitting on CMOs. Because I've been fired by a bunch of CMOs too, so I got a chip on my shoulder. But I'm looking forward to that. That'll be on the second day of Tech Barbecue. Then I tell people to connect with me on LinkedIn for the slides, and ta-da, that's it.